These days, hardly any young people at all are coming into motorcycling compared with what it was like in the 1970s and 1980s.
Vision Zero is a complete nonsense to my
We
mind.
need law enforcement to take motorcycle theft seriously in future, which it hasn't done in the past.
The government, by not supporting the motorcycling community, is overseeing its demise.
Be some sort of priority to start resolving these things. If we don't start looking at them, they're only going to get worse.
Our passion for motorcycling creates a vibrant community. That community delivers benefits. But what does government do to protect and serve our community? We need to make sure that our voices are heard in this general election. We need to make sure that we find a government that's prepared to move on motorcycling. It really doesn't make any difference to me if this is a conspiracy or whether it's just a series of unintended consequences. The fact is that the government, by not supporting the motorcycling community, is overseeing its demise. The lack of interest shown by government to serve the motorcycling community, that basically means the motorcycling community is dying a long and slow death. Any government should support and protect the motorcycling community. We're as much part of society as anybody else, and we have every right for the same level of interest from our government. In the Move on Motorcycling Manifesto, we've identified 3 factors that we think are quietly suppressing the motorcycling community. The first issue that we can see is the current licensing regime. It has progressively made entry into motorcycling and thus the motorcycling community more complex and expensive.
Currently, new people coming into motorcycling will find it incredibly difficult to understand the tiered structure and expensive. So it's prohibiting people coming into riding, or they're becoming continuous CBT takers. So they take their basic training every 2 years and they're not developing as riders necessarily, and they're certainly not feeding into the motorcycling world. It does feel very discriminatory against riders, and particularly those new people. It's barriers to them coming into biking. So I think it's overcomplicated, it's long overdue a reform, and people just don't understand it.
I'm particularly passionate about simplifying the licensing regime and making it less onerous and less expensive. These days, hardly any young people at all are coming into motorcycling compared with what it was like in the 1970s and 1980s. And there are extremely detrimental effects for society as a result.
There are too many hurdles in the way for a person to get into motorcycling and then get to a full motorcycle license.
Well, I'm really concerned about the licensing regime as it stands at the moment. It's complex, it's expensive, and we can see by the numbers here taking the test that it's not attractive, especially when you can get into a motor car, learn to drive that so much more cheaply, so much more quickly, and you can ride or drive anything that you want. You've got a whole series of restrictions when you're a motorcyclist, and that's grossly unfair.
We currently need a 5-page document to explain how to get a motorcycle license. Getting a car license is simple. Getting a motorcycle license, you have to follow a 5-page flowchart to figure out what is the correct route for you as an individual to gain a motorcycle license. To say that there's a lack of desire for people to enter into the motorcycling community is false. Just take a look at the fact that for every person achieving a full motorcycle licence, there have been 5 that took a CBT. The demand is unquestionably there. People are trying to get into motorcycling, but the process is so complex and difficult and expensive that the drop-off rate is enormous. Only 20% of people who start on their journey to getting a full licence actually achieve the full licence. This can't be right. We did get close to an announcement that there would be a review of motorcycle licensing just before the general election was announced. However, with the announcement of the general election, everything has been thrown into chaos. We no longer know if this review will take place. Now, it is true that the Tory manifesto does say that they will carry out the review, but obviously, as we all know, the likelihood is that the Tories are not going to be the government after the election. This is why the Move on Motorcycling Manifesto is pushing for a full review of the motorcycle licensing regime. We need all parties to get behind this and for everybody to support this post-election. Licensing is only one of 3 factors that we think has had a negative impact on the motorcycling community. We do not believe that Vision Zero, the approach to road safety currently being pushed, is actually delivering for motorcyclists.
Road safety is a big issue, and it's misconceived among those that don't ride a motorbike. Vision Zero is a complete nonsense to my mind, and I just feel that there are many areas where road safety is laid at the door of the motorcyclists when it is often other drivers. It shouldn't be down to the rider to have to cover themselves with cameras and day glow to try and get the other drivers to see them. And it's actually not just drivers, people on push bikes, pedestrians, they've got their headphones on, they're on their phone, they're just not paying attention, and everyone on the road deserves to have that attention paid to them. There's a lack of respect for road users between all the different groups. Car drivers with car drivers have a lack of respect, even professional drivers. People are against deadlines, and that seems to mean that road safety, respect for others and paying due care and attention has just gone.
Now, the government at this point in time has not formally adopted Vision Zero, but they're under an awful lot of pressure to do so. There are various local authorities and regional mayors that have taken on Vision Zero. London, for example, has set a date of 2041 to achieve 0 casualties on the roads in London. Now, you may ask, what's the problem with aspiring to eliminate all road deaths? The problem comes when you set a defined target date to achieve it. Setting a target date is questionable. It can create a tendency towards restricting, discouraging or even banning motorcycling. But there's more to it than that. Vision Zero itself consistently focuses on the need to encourage active travel over and above other forms of transport. Unfortunately, it does this often at the expense of the safety of other road users, especially motorcyclists. As motorcyclists, we see continual messaging that says that we need to improve the skills of motorcyclists, while cyclists see billions of pounds invested into redesigning and reallocating road space for their advantage. This difference of approach for 2 different vulnerable road user groups is illogical and unfair. Why is it that infrastructure spending should be the solution for cycling safety, whereas training is the only solution proffered for motorcyclist safety? And here's another question for you. How often have you heard a politician or a government spokesman say that road safety is one of the things that is preventing people from taking up cycling? But how often have you heard the government say that road safety is preventing people from taking up motorcycling? There's this difference in attitude, that core belief that is based in the Vision Zero approach to road safety. So Vision Zero is not delivering for motorcyclists, and this is why we are promoting welcoming roads as an alternative approach. Everybody has a right to be safe on the roads, no matter what form of transport they are taking. Nobody's safety is placed above the safety of anybody else, and other factors that may or may not be legitimate to push for should not be the defining factor for road safety. So increasing active travel, sustainable transport, whatever you want to call it, is not the reason to let motorcycling be less safe. We want the safety of motorcyclists placed above any prioritisation for preferred transport choices. We don't expect motorcycle safety to be more important than any other road user safety, but we cannot accept it being lower. The third factor that we've identified is crime. We see spiralling insurance costs and a disproportionate impact of vehicle theft on motorcyclists is pushing people out of the community as well as putting many people off joining it.
Well, one of the things that has plagued motorcyclists for many decades now is the rate of theft. The police don't seem to see it as a priority. As far as motorcycle theft is concerned, it's much more prevalent than cars.
We seem to be completely overlooked. More motorbikes are stolen in proportion to cars, and yet it seems to be a blind spot. The police need to take it seriously and investigate it, and it should be higher up the priority level than it seems to be at present. It is preventing people from remaining in biking or even stepping up through biking, and it just seems to be completely overlooked.
As MAG has shown, motorcyclists are the victims of about a quarter of all vehicle theft offences, and that's despite the fact that motorcycles only make up 3% of the registered vehicles in this country. But we don't see a proportionate response from policing. Any other community facing a disproportionate impact from crime would expect a proportionate response from policing. So why are we not entitled to the same?
The police don't seem to take it very seriously at all. We do run in MAG our own anti-theft reward scheme, which we've run now since I think it was about 1989, but we can't really make much of a dent in it on our own, and we need law enforcement to take motorcycle theft seriously in future, which it hasn't done in the past.
When we look at the national figures, the deterrence for motorcycle thieves is actually diminishing. The numbers of prosecutions for vehicle theft in 2022 were more than 70% lower than they were in 2010. A mere 2 to 3% of vehicle theft offences resulted in prosecution in 2022. This should be a criminal offence in itself. The average custodial sentence for a vehicle theft is just over a year, despite the fact that the maximum is 7 years. And if thieves are charged with taking without consent, which is a lesser offence, the average sentence drops to a mere 3 months. Of course, very often a custodial sentence isn't the outcome for a thief that gets caught by the police. It can very often be just a fine.
Police need to invest the resources, otherwise it's going to make biking unaffordable, because if you have your bike stolen, you certainly get an increase in your insurance premium, and you never actually win. You'll never get the whole price of your motorcycle back. So it puts people in the position where either they can't afford a replacement motorcycle, or if they can, they probably think the money should go elsewhere because the risk of theft is just too high.
The average fine given for anybody who was convicted of vehicle theft in 2022 was just £197. That's less than the compulsory excess on most motorcycle insurance policies. The police response is inadequate. The judicial outcomes are limp. We are calling for both of these issues to be tackled by a new government. The overly complex and expensive routes to legitimate riding, the lack of an appropriate response to motorcycle theft, and the lack of interest in rider safety is pushing an increased number of people away from motorcycling. This spiral of decline that is caused by these three major factors that we have identified will continue if the government does not recognise and address this issue. The government needs to serve the motorcycling community, not let it decline. So we do need riders to get involved in this general election. Stand up for the riding community. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to the biking community. Politicians are there to serve us. We must tell them how they can serve our community. Let's get them to move on motorcycling. Visit our Act Now webpage and start doing your share for the community.